Julian Lisa says no great nation has ever been built by dividing it. Is that what you've done here? And did you misjudge the support of coalition voters for this proposed voice?
As Julian's pointed out, his position is at odds to the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, I think he used in his words, of our party room. And that's, and we respect that. I mean, that's the case in workplaces. It'll be the case in families around the country where people will have a different view, and I respect that. I respect that people have arrived at a position of yes or no, or for the vast majority of Australians, to be frank, they don't know yet what the voice is. So I think as more people understand that, as they get the detail, they'll ask the questions, and surely at some stage the Prime Minister has to answer the question. I'd point out in Julian's statement this morning his criticism of the approach taken by the Prime Minister. If anybody in this debate is dividing the country, it's Anthony Albanese. When Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister, when Scott Morrison was Prime Minister, when Tony Abbott was Prime Minister, they provided a bipartisan arrangement, and all of the Karma Langton work was done on a bipartisan basis. There was significant engagement with the then opposition, the Labor Party. From May of last year, as Julian pointed out today, that stopped. When Mr Albanese was elected Prime Minister, he stopped engaging. Now, he'll say, oh, you've met with me on a handful of occasions. It was essentially as a courtesy. So you could tick the box and say he'd spoken to me before he went out to see. In the last case, the cameras were already assembled when he asked me to come in, and that's not consultation. It's just a courtesy so that he can say to the press conference that he's spoken to me. There was no significant engagement at all. And I think the Prime Minister is dividing the country at a time when we should be uniting it, and that's exactly what the Liberal Party is seeking to do.
Just on China, we've seen breaking news that trade sanctions on Australian barley will soon be lifted. Why do you think Labor has been more successful in de-escalating and ending trade disputes with China?
Well, China is an incredibly important trading partner for us, and I'm very pleased if sanctions are lifted. They shouldn't have been put on in the first place. I think a lot of Europeans, you've seen the activity of NATO over the course of the last few days, they're very concerned about what they're seeing in our part of the world. And I think we need to be very conscious of that. And the world needs to unite, not to be divided, particularly the West. And Western democracies need to stand up together to make sure that the peace does prevail in our country. I've spent a lifetime protecting the community, firstly as a police officer, and protecting our country and its interests for my entire time over the course of the last 2 decades. As Defence Minister, we arrived at the AUKUS decision, which to the government's credit they've now implemented, because it's in our country's best interest to do so. And I'm not pulling punches, I'm not going to give you cute, mealy-mouthed words. I call it as I see it. And I do that because I believe it's in the best interest of our country. We want peace to continue in our country. We want the status quo in relation to Taiwan. We want to work with China as a valued trading partner. We want to see the jobs and the economic activity continue to flourish, but we don't compromise on our values as a country. And we've supported the Prime Minister and the government in their outreach to many countries in our part of the world and across the world otherwise. And that will continue. It's important in our national interest to do that.